Welcome to Life Stories, where we share powerful tales of resilience, kindness, and life-changing moments. In today's story, we meet Jack, a hardworking man who made a choice on a rainy day that cost him everything only to discover it was the start of something extraordinary. His selflessness not only saved a life but transformed his own future in ways he never imagined. Subscribe to Life Stories now to join us on this incredible journey of compassion and redemption. Let's begin today's tale of courage and kindness that will leave you inspired. Jack lived a quiet life in Cleveland, Ohio, in a modest apartment he shared with his mother. Their days were simple but filled with quiet struggles. His mother, Linda, required regular medical care, and the mounting bills were a constant weight on Jack's shoulders. Despite the challenges, their bond was unshakable, and Jack's love for his mother was his driving force. Every morning, Jack would rise at 4 a.m., long before the city stirred, to prepare breakfast for Linda. He'd leave her a warm meal and her daily medication before heading out to his job at a warehouse on the outskirts of town. The work was grueling, shifts that stretched for hours, lifting heavy boxes in the loading area, but it kept the lights on and paid for his mother's medicine. Jack's co-workers rarely paid attention to him. In the competitive warehouse environment, most were too focused on meeting quotas to care about anyone else. The supervisors weren't much better, treating employees as little more than numbers in a system. Still, Jack showed up every day, never complaining, even as his body ached from the relentless demands of the job. It was a rainy Tuesday morning when everything changed. Jack arrived at the warehouse early, the grey clouds overhead casting a somber mood over the day. Rain slicked the pavement, turning the loading dock into a treacherous zone. Signs warned customers to proceed with caution, but the worsening weather made it difficult for anyone to stay steady. Jack noticed an elderly woman slowly approaching the customer pickup area, a small receipt clutched tightly in her shaking hands. She looked frail, her steps hesitant as the wind tugged at her coat. Jack's heart tightened. Something about her reminded him of his mother. Be careful, Jack called out from his station, his voice straining to carry over the sound of the rain. But the wind swallowed his words, and before he could do anything, the woman's foot slipped on the wet surface. She fell hard onto the concrete, a pained cry escaping her lips. Jack froze for a moment, torn between his instincts and the strict rules of his job. The warehouse policies were clear: employees were not allowed to leave their stations during shifts. Jack had already received 3 warnings. One more mistake would mean immediate termination. His supervisor, Mr. Peterson, had made that abundantly clear in yesterday's meeting. Your station is your responsibility, Peterson had barked. Leave it, and you're done here. Jack looked around, hoping someone else might step in, but his co-workers avoided eye contact, pretending not to notice the elderly woman lying on the ground. Jack clenched his fists, torn between his livelihood and his conscience. Then his mother's face flashed in his mind. What if it were her lying there, hurt and alone? Without another thought, Jack left his station and ran to the woman's side. She clutched her hip, her face pale and contorted in pain. Try not to move, Jack said gently, kneeling beside her. He took off his work jacket and draped it over her to shield her from the rain. My name's Jack. Are you hurt badly? The woman nodded, tears mixing with the rain on her face. I think I've broken something, she whispered, her voice trembling. Jack pulled out his phone and called for an ambulance, his voice steady despite the storm raging around him. He stayed with her, holding his jacket over her head, murmuring reassurances as the rain poured down. It wasn't long before Mr. Peterson appeared, his face red with anger. Jack, get back to your station, he shouted, his voice cutting through the downpour. Jack didn't move. She's hurt, sir. I can't leave her alone in this condition, he replied, his tone calm but resolute. This is your final warning, Jack, Peterson barked. Get back now, or you're fired. Jack looked down at the elderly woman. then back at Peterson. The decision was clear. "I'm sorry, sir," he said quietly, "but I won't leave her." Peterson's jaw tightened as he pulled out his clipboard. "Then you're terminated. Clear out your locker after the ambulance arrives." He turned and stormed off, leaving Jack in the rain with the woman still clutching his hand. When the paramedics arrived, they carefully placed the woman on a stretcher. Before they wheeled her away, she reached for Jack's hand one last time. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're an angel." Jack stood there, soaked to the bone, watching the ambulance disappear into the distance. His job, the one thing keeping his fragile world intact, was gone. How would he pay for his mother's medicine? How would they survive? From a sleek black car parked across the lot, 3 figures observed the scene silently. Their eyes followed Jack as he walked back into the warehouse to clear out his locker. They exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. As Jack trudged home in the rain, his belongings in a small box, he dialed his mother's number. "Mom," he said, his voice cracking, "I need to tell you something." Linda listened quietly as Jack explained what had happened. When he finished, her response was gentle but firm. "You did the right thing, Jack. We'll figure something out. We always do." That night, Jack sat at their small kitchen table, his old laptop open in front of him. He scrolled through job listings, his heart heavy with uncertainty. His mother placed a cup of tea beside him, her smile a small but comforting gesture. Before Jack could speak, his phone rang. An unknown number flashed on the screen. Hesitantly, he answered. "Is this Jack?" a woman's professional voice asked. "This is Margaret Stone from Stone Enterprises. We'd like you to come in for a meeting tomorrow morning." Jack's heart skipped a beat. "There must be a mistake," he said. "I'm just a warehouse worker." "No mistake," Margaret replied. "A car will pick you up at 9 a.m. The address is already being sent to your phone." The call ended before Jack could ask any questions. As he set the phone down, Linda looked at him with curiosity. "What was that about?" Jack shook his head, still processing the conversation. "I'm not sure. Some big company wants to meet me tomorrow." As the rain continued to fall outside, Jack's mind raced with possibilities. He had no idea that his life was about to change forever. The next morning, Jack awoke to a persistent sense of disbelief. Had the phone call been real? Or just a strange dream brought on by exhaustion and worry? Yet there it was on his phone, a message with an address directing him to a private terminal at the Cleveland airport. Jack dressed in his best shirt and slacks, though they were a little worn and didn't fit quite as well as they once had. His mother, Linda, stood by the door as he prepared to leave. "Don't overthink it," she said gently. "Sometimes good things happen when you least expect them." At exactly 9 a.m., a sleek black car pulled up in front of their building. The driver stepped out and opened the door for Jack. Offering a polite nod, Jack felt entirely out of place as he slid into the luxurious interior. The soft leather seats a stark contrast to the hard warehouse benches he was used to. As the car weaved through the morning traffic, Jack noticed something extraordinary. 3 private jets gleamed on the tarmac as they approached the airport's private terminal. He frowned in confusion as the car drove directly toward the largest jet. When they arrived, a small group of people in tailored suits stood waiting. Among them was a woman Jack recognized instantly. It was the elderly lady he had helped in the rain. But today, she stood tall, her posture regal and her demeanor warm. Beside her were 2 men who radiated the same confidence and intensity. "Welcome, Jack," the woman said, smiling as she extended her hand. "I'm Margaret Stone, CEO of Stone Enterprises. And these are my sons, Michael and William." Jack's mouth went dry as realization set in. He had helped one of the wealthiest and most powerful women in the country. Words failed him, and Margaret chuckled softly, sensing his discomfort. "Please, come aboard," she said, gesturing toward the jet. Jack followed her up the steps, his worn shoes clicking against the polished metal. The interior of the jet was more luxurious than anything he had ever seen: plush seating, rich wood paneling, and soft lighting that exuded sophistication. He sat across from Margaret, his nerves barely contained. "Yesterday, you sacrificed your job to help me," Margaret began, her tone both kind and serious. "Not many people would make that choice." Jack nodded silently, unsure of how to respond. Michael leaned forward, studying Jack with sharp eyes. "We saw everything," he said. "Your courage, your compassion. It's rare. We need people like you." Margaret added. "People who don't just follow rules but do what's right, even when it costs them everything." Jack blinked, confused. "I'm just a warehouse worker," he said quietly. Margaret's smile deepened. "You're much more than that, Jack. We've been looking for someone with your character to lead a new division at Stone Enterprises." Michael slid a folder across the table. Jack hesitated before opening it, his breath catching when he saw the proposed salary. It was more money than he had ever dreamed of making. And it came with full benefits, including medical coverage for his mother. "You'll head our community outreach division," Margaret explained. "We're expanding to support families in need. And we want you to lead the charge." "I don't have any experience in corporate work," Jack said, his voice trembling. Margaret placed a reassuring hand on his. "You have the most important qualification: a good heart. Everything else can be learned." Jack's eyes filled with tears as he thought of his mother's mounting medical bills, the long hours at the warehouse, and the sacrifices they had made just to stay afloat. "Why me?" he asked softly. Margaret's gaze was steady. "Because yesterday, you saw me as a person, not a problem. That's exactly who we need." Her words hung in the air as Jack sat back, overwhelmed by the enormity of what was being offered. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that life could be different. Michael slid a set of keys across the table. "This is to your new apartment," he said. 2 bedrooms, fully furnished, near our main office. It's yours as part of the position." Jack could barely speak. "Thank you," he managed, his voice thick with emotion. Margaret smiled warmly. "You earned it, Jack. Now, let's go get your mother. She deserves to be part of this, too." As the car pulled up to his apartment building, Jack's hands trembled as he called his mom. "Be ready in 10 minutes," he said, his voice shaking. "Some people want to meet you." Linda stood waiting by the curb, her face etched with curiosity and concern. When the car door opened and Margaret stepped out, Linda's eyes widened in surprise. "Mrs. Linda," Margaret said, extending a hand. "Your son saved my life yesterday. Now, let us show you how we plan to change yours." Linda hesitated for a moment, overwhelmed by the sight of Margaret Stone and the luxurious car that seemed out of place in their modest neighborhood. Jack stepped forward, taking his mother's hand with a reassuring smile. "It's okay, Mom," he said softly. "Just trust me." Margaret guided Linda into the car, her demeanor warm and genuine. Linda clutched her son's hand tightly as they drove toward the towering headquarters of Stone Enterprises in downtown Cleveland. The city's skyline loomed ahead, but Linda's thoughts remained fixed on the uncertainty of the moment. As the car pulled into the building's private driveway, Linda's breath caught. The sleek, modern structure stretched high into the clouds, its glass walls reflecting the morning sunlight. Inside, employees bustled about, their polished appearances and purposeful strides making Linda feel out of place. Margaret, sensing her discomfort, placed a hand on Linda's shoulder. "You belong here," she said kindly. "This day is as much about you as it is about Jack." They stepped into an elevator that whisked them to the top floor, where Margaret's sons, Michael and William, waited. The doors opened to reveal an office that was more of a penthouse than a workspace. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city, and the room was tastefully furnished with sleek furniture and art that spoke of understated elegance. This is your new office, Jack, Michael said, gesturing to a large wooden desk situated near the windows. Your team starts Monday, and your first project will be launching programs for families in need. Jack's mouth fell open. The desk, the view, the sheer magnitude of the space, it was all surreal. I don't know what to say, he admitted, his voice tinged with awe. You've already said enough through your actions, Margaret said with a smile. William pointed to a smaller door off to the side. Through there is another opportunity. Mrs. Linda, he said. Our employee assistance department is looking for someone with compassion and experience in overcoming challenges. If you're interested, there's a position waiting for you. Linda blinked in disbelief. Me? But I haven't worked in years because of my health. Margaret stepped forward. The position is flexible, with hours that suit your needs. You'll be helping others navigate difficulties similar to what you've faced. Your resilience is valuable, and we'd be honored to have you. Linda's eyes filled with tears. The idea of being able to work again, of contributing in a meaningful way, seemed almost too good to be true. I don't know how to thank you, she said, her voice trembling. You've already thanked us by raising a son with such integrity, Margaret replied. But the surprises weren't over yet. Michael handed Jack a second set of keys. This is for your new apartment, he said. 2 bedrooms. Fully furnished. Just a short distance from here. It's ready for you to move in today. Jack turned to his mother, who looked at him with a mixture of pride and disbelief. Can we really do this? Mom, he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Linda smiled through her tears. I think we already are, Jack. The rest of the day felt like a whirlwind. They visited the apartment, a bright, modern space that felt like a dream compared to their old home. Linda marveled at the kitchen's sleek appliances and the cozy yet elegant design of the living room. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to imagine a life without constant worry. That evening, as they sat together in their new home, Jack looked out the window at the skyline. He thought about the rainy day that had changed everything. The moment he had chosen compassion over self-preservation. Mom, he said softly, I think this is just the beginning. Linda placed her hand on his. And it all started because you couldn't ignore someone in need. Jack nodded, his heart full as he gazed at the city lights. He didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but for the first time in years, he felt ready to face them. As the weeks turned into months, Jack embraced his new role at Stone Enterprises, leading initiatives that brought hope to countless families. His mother, Linda, thrived in her new position, her health improving as she helped others navigate their struggles. Together, they built a life filled with purpose and gratitude, proof that compassion could spark profound change. Jack often reflected on the rainy day that had set everything in motion. What had seemed like a moment of loss had transformed into an opportunity to make a difference. His choice to act with kindness, even at great personal cost, had rewritten his future. Thank you for joining us for this heartfelt story on Life Stories. If this tale inspired you, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to catch more uplifting narratives. See you in the next story.